He's the man accused of decapitating his wife. The two had only been married a few months.
Blood-soaked walls, a kitchen knife discarded on the floor, and in the shower of a small cabin in rural Texas, the severed head of a 21-year-old woman. This wasn't a scene from a horror movie. This was the horrific reality discovered by police in Magnolia, Texas on January 11th, 2023. What they found inside that tiny home behind the main property would shock even the most seasoned investigators. Anggy Diaz, a vibrant young immigrant who had been working multiple jobs to support her family back in Nicaragua, lay dismembered in pools of her own blood. Her decapitated body showed signs of multiple stab wounds. The person responsible wasn't a stranger who had broken in or a random attacker. It was her husband of just 2 months, James Dicus, who calmly confessed to police upon their arrival. A newlywed turned murderer in the span of 60 days. Anggy and Jared's story began where many relationships do, at work. Anggy, who had come to America seeking better opportunities, met Jared while working at a local meat market. Their courtship progressed quickly, culminating in a wedding ceremony in October 2022, officiated by Waller County Judge Trey Duhan. Photos from that day show a smiling couple, with Judge Duhan later remarking they seemed like a very nice young couple. But beneath the surface, troubling signs were emerging. Friends noticed changes in Anggy's demeanor after the wedding. Police had previously responded to domestic disturbance calls at their residence, though none had escalated to physical violence. The newlyweds lived in a small cabin behind Dicus' parents' home, the same cabin that would become a crime scene just 2 months after they exchanged vows. What transformed this seemingly ordinary relationship into one that would end in such unimaginable brutality? If you've ever wondered how someone could commit such a horrific act against someone they vowed to love, stay with me. This story contains critical warning signs we all need to recognize. Hit that subscribe button now, because understanding these patterns could literally save someone's life, maybe even your own or someone you love. In this video, we'll explore the questions that haunt this case. What warning signs were missed in the weeks leading up to Anggy's murder? How did a hard-working immigrant with dreams of supporting her family end up in such a dangerous situation? And perhaps most importantly, could this tragedy have been prevented? We'll examine the investigation that led to Jared's confession and the evidence that sealed his fate in court. We'll look at the mental health questions raised during his trial and what his 40-year sentence means for justice in domestic violence cases. Beyond the crime itself, we'll explore the broader implications for immigrant communities and domestic violence awareness. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what happened to Anggy Diaz, but also how to recognize the red flags that might indicate someone is in danger. These insights could be crucial in preventing similar tragedies in your own community. Anggy Diaz's journey began in Nicaragua, where economic hardship and limited opportunities shaped her early life. Like many immigrants, she made the difficult decision to leave her homeland behind, not primarily for herself, but to create a better future for her family. The American dream beckoned with promises of opportunity and financial stability that seemed impossible in her native country. Upon arriving in Texas, Anggy wasted no time establishing herself as someone willing to work tirelessly to achieve her goals. She secured not 1 but 2 jobs, working long hours at both a local meat market and a taqueria. Her days started early and ended late, with barely enough time to rest before beginning again. Yet according to those who knew her, she never complained about the grueling schedule. Before leaving Nicaragua, Anggy had been studying to become an accountant. Though her education was temporarily paused, she maintained her ambitions. More recently, she had added another role to her already packed schedule, becoming a fitness coach. This new venture reflected both her entrepreneurial spirit and her determination to maximize every opportunity available to her. Her work ethic wasn't just about survival. It represented her fundamental belief that through dedication and perseverance, she could transform not only her life, but the lives of those she loved back home. As the eldest of 4 siblings, Anggy carried a sense of responsibility that extended far beyond her 21 years. Her family in Nicaragua wasn't just emotionally dependent on her. They relied on her financially, particularly her mother, who was battling cancer. The money Anggy sent home wasn't for luxuries. It funded life-saving medical treatments that would have been otherwise unattainable. Every extra shift, every hour of overtime had purpose. Her mother's cancer treatment. This burden would be overwhelming for anyone, let alone someone so young living in a foreign country. Yet according to her uncle, who described her as the light of our family, Anggy embraced this responsibility with remarkable grace and determination. The distance between Texas and Nicaragua couldn't diminish the deep bonds Anggy maintained with her family. Regular calls, video chats, and money transfers were her way of remaining present in their lives despite the physical separation. Her sacrifice was their lifeline, a reality that made her untimely death all the more devastating for those waiting for her back home. Those who knew Anggy consistently described her with the same constellation of positive attributes: bright, optimistic, energetic, and perpetually smiling. Her boss noted that despite her youth, she possessed remarkable clarity about her future, saying she had so many goals in life. This wasn't just the casual observation of an employer. It was evident in how Anggy approached each day with purpose and enthusiasm. Her infectious personality made her popular among co-workers and customers alike. Even after exhausting shifts, friends recall how she maintained her signature smile and uplifting attitude. She possessed a rare quality that drew people to her: the ability to remain positive despite challenging circumstances. This resilience wasn't just a personality trait. It was a survival strategy honed through years of overcoming obstacles. Beyond supporting her family, Anggy harbored dreams of continuing her education in America and eventually establishing herself professionally. She viewed her current jobs not as endpoints, but as stepping stones toward a brighter future she was methodically building. Anggy met James Dicus at the local meat market where she worked, a seemingly ordinary beginning to what would become a tragically abbreviated relationship. Customers and co-workers observed their interactions evolving from casual conversations to something more personal. Their courtship progressed rapidly, perhaps too rapidly in hindsight. Little is publicly known about their dating period, but within months, Jared had proposed. Friends later recalled that Anggy appeared genuinely happy during this time, excited about building a life with someone in her adopted country. The couple moved into a small cabin behind Jared's parents' home in Magnolia, Texas, creating what should have been their first shared sanctuary as a couple. On a crisp October day in 2022, Anggy Diaz and James Dicus exchanged vows in a ceremony officiated by Walla County Judge Trade Duhan. Wedding photos captured the moment: Anggy radiant in her white dress, Jared standing proudly beside her. To those in attendance, they appeared to be embarking on a promising journey together. Judge Duhan would later recall them as a very nice young couple, a description that would haunt him after the events that followed. The newlyweds received congratulations from family and friends, with many expressing how perfect they seemed for each other. Jared's parents welcomed Anggy into their family, offering the couple housing in the small cabin behind their main residence. This arrangement provided the young couple with privacy while keeping them close to family support, an ideal situation for newlyweds starting out. On the surface, everything appeared normal: a young couple in love, beginning their life together with hope and optimism. No one at the wedding could have predicted the horrific turn their relationship would take in just 60 days. Within weeks of the wedding, those closest to Anggy began noticing subtle but troubling changes. The once perpetually smiling young woman became increasingly withdrawn. Co-workers observed that her characteristic enthusiasm had dimmed, replaced by a quieter, more reserved demeanor. When asked about her marriage, her responses became vague and evasive. One friend later told investigators that Anggy had begun canceling plans at the last minute, often with explanations that involved Jared needing her at home. Her phone calls to family in Nicaragua became less frequent, and when she did call, family members noted she seemed hesitant to speak freely. Another concerning pattern emerged. Anggy began wearing long-sleeved shirts even in warm weather, a common tactic used to hide bruises. Perhaps most telling was her decreased social media activity. The once active poster who shared glimpses of her daily life suddenly went quiet online. These changes, while subtle individually, formed a pattern that her friends would later recognize as classic signs of isolation, a common control tactic in abusive relationships. What few people knew at the time was that police had already been called to the couple's residence for domestic disturbances. January 11th, 2023 began as an ordinary Wednesday in Magnolia, Texas. Anggy Diaz woke early for a shift at the meat market, leaving the small cabin before dawn while Jared was still asleep. Security footage would later show her arriving at work at approximately 6:15 in the morning, greeting coworkers with her characteristic smile despite the early hour. Throughout the morning, Anggy exchanged text messages with Jared, communications that investigators would later describe as increasingly tense. Around 11:30, she took her lunch break, making a brief call to her sister in Nicaragua, the last time her family would hear her voice. Coworkers later recalled that she seemed distracted during the shift, checking her phone more frequently than usual. Anggy clocked out at 2:45 in the afternoon, telling colleagues she needed to head home early to address an issue with Jared. This deviation from her normal routine, she typically worked until closing, raised no immediate concerns among her coworkers. Security cameras captured her leaving the parking lot in her small sedan, the last public sighting of Anggy alive. What transpired in the following hours remains partially unclear, but investigators believe Anggy arrived home shortly after 3 o'clock. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices from the cabin around 4:30, followed by an unusual silence. By 7 o'clock that evening, the unthinkable had occurred. Earlier that day, surveillance footage from the meat market captured James Dicus arriving at Anggy's workplace around 10:15 in the morning. He was seen entering the store, briefly speaking with Anggy at the counter, then leaving to purchase a beer from a nearby convenience store. Security cameras showed him drinking the beer in the parking lot while watching the market's entrance. Coworkers described the interaction as tense but not overtly hostile. What investigators discovered inside the cabin defied comprehension. Blood saturated nearly every surface of the small living space. Walls, furniture, and flooring all bore evidence of an extraordinarily violent attack. Forensic analysis would later determine that the assault began in the living room area, where signs of struggle were evident in overturned furniture and broken personal items.
Jared Dicus is on suicide watch here at the jail tonight. Meanwhile, his wife's family wants her body returned and buried in Nicaragua. Visitors consoled each other at the growing memorial for Anggy Diaz this evening outside of the meat market where she'd worked for the last 3 years until Wednesday. The 21-year-old was allegedly killed that day by her newlywed husband, Jared Dicus, who the Waller County Sheriff says decapitated his wife with a kitchen knife at the couple's home.
Me siento profundamente dolida.
Diaz's mother says she's extremely hurt after learning the horrific details of her daughter's death. The Waller County Sheriff says the time of Diaz's death is still under investigation. Yesterday, KHOU 11 obtained surveillance video of the suspect stealing a beer from the meat market where his wife worked on the day of her murder. The sheriff says it isn't clear if Dicus went to the business before or after his wife was killed.
Esto es lo más horrible que puede suceder para una mamá.
Danny Diaz says this is the worst thing that could happen to a mother. Tonight, we're learning that when the murder allegedly occurred, Jared Dicus was already on bond. 2 months ago, Dicus was arrested and charged with driving while intoxicated in Montgomery County. According to court documents, a Magnolia police officer was dispatched to a Whataburger at about 2 o'clock in the morning for a disturbance. The employees of the Whataburger called 911 after they say Dicus became aggressive. Employees told police Dicus was in the drive-thru and wanted to use Apple Pay for his food order. The officer writes that Dicus argued with the employees about the payment, then tried to go inside the restaurant. The officer writes, quote, he was so belligerent that they locked him out. According to the officer, there was a bottle of Bud Light in the console of Dicus's car that was 3/4 full and still cold. The officer writes that Dicus admitted to taking painkillers but could not give the name. After that, he was taken into custody and later released on a $1,000 bond. Back near her home, a second memorial site has been created outside of the home of Diaz's aunt. In the center is Anggy Diaz's bike, which she would ride each day from her house to the meat market where she worked. A vigil will be held at the memorial site tomorrow evening. In Waller County, I'm Matt Doherty, KHOU 11 News.
Waller County District Attorney Sean Whitmore delivered powerful remarks following the sentencing. Today's outcome sends a clear message that domestic violence will not be tolerated in our community. Whitmore stated, while no prison sentence can bring Anggy back or heal the wounds inflicted on her family, this punishment ensures that justice has been served. Whitmore specifically addressed the broader implications of the case. Heinous crimes like this one will not go unanswered. We will seek justice for the victims of domestic violence and send a message to perpetrators that here, we fight for our victims. He praised the thorough investigation conducted by the Waller County Sheriff's Office and thanked Anggy's family for their courage throughout the legal proceedings. The devastating news of Anggy's murder traveled quickly to her family in Nicaragua, transforming their lives in an instant. Her mother, already battling cancer and dependent on the financial support Anggy provided, collapsed upon hearing of her daughter's death. In a heart-wrenching interview with local media, Anggy's mother expressed not only profound grief, but also a surprising absence of hatred. I have nothing against Jared's parents. God bless them. They are suffering too. This remarkable capacity for compassion extended to other family members as well. Anggy's uncle, who had been particularly close to her, told reporters, losing Anggy feels like losing a daughter. It has been very hard. As a family, we are heartbroken. Yet he too emphasized that vengeance would not bring healing. The family's primary concern became bringing Anggy's remains back to Nicaragua, a process complicated by international regulations and the significant expense involved in transporting a body across borders. The shocking nature of Anggy's murder galvanized the community of Magnolia, Texas. Within days of the news breaking, local residents organized a candlelight vigil outside the meat market where she had worked.
Waller County Sheriff Troy Guidry says they do have a confession, but he will not comment on a possible motive. He did say, though, the 21-year-old Jared Dicus did wait for deputies to arrive at the home where his wife was killed.
It's a gruesome scene at best.
Sheriff Troy Guidry said Jared Dicus shared a home with his new bride that is directly behind his parents' home in the Oak Hollow subdivision. On Wednesday afternoon, Dicus went into his parents' house and said something that concerned them.
When they saw something wasn't feeling right for them, they approached the house that they were living in, and that's when they found what they found.
Guidry said Dicus' wife, Anggy Diaz, was found partially dismembered in a kitchen knife is believed to be the murder weapon. Guidry said Dicus was then arrested.
We brought him back for his witness statement, and that's when he confessed to it.
The couple married last October. Waller County Judge Trey Duhan officiated the ceremony and posted a statement reading, "During my short time with them, they were a very nice young couple. As with many of you, I'm greatly saddened and shocked by the news of this tragic event."
No matter what type you walked in or what time it was or how you felt or whatever, her smile just lit up the room. It was incredible.
Diaz worked at Chepe's meat market in Taqueria.
Muy buena persona, muy inteligente.
She was a great person, intelligent and hardworking. Manager Ruth Armendariz says Diaz did also talk about her brief marriage to Dicus.
No era feliz.
No, she wasn't happy. She said he was one person before they got married and another person after, who became very jealous. Dicus remains in the Waller County Jail, and Sheriff Guidry says he is likely facing murder charges. When we spoke with Waller County District Attorney Elton Mathis, he said his office is still reviewing all of the evidence before commenting on specific charges. Reporting live from the Waller County Sheriff's Office, Robert Arnold, KPRC 2 News.
More than 200 people gathered, many of whom had never met Anggy but were moved by her story and the senseless violence that ended her life. A GoFundMe campaign launched by Anggy's co-workers quickly gained traction, ultimately raising over $20,000 to help with funeral expenses and the costs of returning her body to Nicaragua. Local businesses contributed as well, with restaurants hosting benefit dinners and the taqueria, where she had worked part-time, donating a week's worth of profits to the cause. Perhaps most touching were the contributions from the immigrant community, many of whom donated despite their own financial struggles. As one donor wrote on the fundraising page, "Anggy's story is our story. We come to this country with dreams, and no one should have those dreams stolen through violence." After nearly 3 weeks of navigating bureaucratic hurdles and international regulations, Anggy's body finally returned to her homeland in early February 2023. The funeral in her hometown drew hundreds of mourners, with local news covering the procession through streets lined with residents holding white flowers, a symbol of innocence in Nicaraguan culture. The ceremony blended Catholic traditions with personal tributes, celebrating Anggy's determination and generosity. Her mother, though weakened by cancer treatment, stood strong throughout the service, later telling reporters that laying her daughter to rest in their homeland provided a small measure of peace amid unimaginable loss. "She has come home," she said simply. "Now she rests where she began." Anggy Diaz's tragic story reminds us that domestic violence can escalate rapidly and fatally. The warning signs were there: isolation, behavioral changes, and previous police calls. Her death underscores the vital importance of recognizing these red flags early and the need for better support systems for vulnerable immigrants who may lack traditional safety nets. If this story impacted you, please hit the like button and share it to raise awareness about domestic violence. Subscribe to Explosive True Crime Stories for more cases that could save lives.